right, good afternoon, everyone. My apology for the delay. We had a tabletop exercise at One Police Plaza and then a press conference afterwards that went over, so my apology. Welcome to the hearing. First, we have two bills that will raise environmental standards for our city's buildings and capital projects. Climate change is an existential threat to New Yorkers and to our entire planet. It is our moral imperative to act and to act fast. Our plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050 requires a tremendous effort by our city to harness clean energy and build greener buildings. Intro 701A sets low energy intensity targets for city capital projects, and from this day forward requires city-owned buildings that are built, expanded, or reconstructed to reach those targets. Sponsor is Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito. This will ensure our buildings can serve as much energy as possible and also generate renewable energy where possible. The next bill, Intro 721A, updates the city's green building code to require more city capital projects meet higher LEED standards, L-E-E-D standards. Sponsors Councilmember Jumaane Williams. LEED is Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, and now I'd like to introduce the Director of the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, Nilda Mesa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, Chairman Jumaane Williams, and City Council for sponsoring and supporting Intro 701 and 721. Thank you also to members of the Committee on Housing and Buildings and to many, many agencies like DDC, DCAS, SCA, EDC, NYCHA, and HPD who worked tirelessly over many months to make these bills happen. These are groundbreaking laws. They're putting us on the path towards exemplary high-performance building standards for new construction and large renovations by 2030. Once again, New York City is leading by example. These will build upon the city's and mayor's commitment to cut greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050, while also focusing on a healthy indoor environment, water conservation, recycling, and sourcing sustainable building materials. Roughly 70% of our greenhouse gas emissions citywide are from buildings. City-owned buildings make up 4% of citywide greenhouse gas emissions. 701 requires tough new energy requirements for the vast majority of new city construction, either 50% above the median for building types or a high-performance exemplary building standard. Having the city's new construction meet these standards will build capacity and spur the market towards wider adoption of these practices, which also helps our overall goal to reach 80 by 50 citywide. This law, and as well as the other, are models for other cities, and they are one of the most aggressive sets of targets worldwide and certainly in North America. With 721, new and renovated city buildings, for the most part, will go from LEED Silver version 3 to LEED version 4 Gold. Performance metering will be required for energy and water, and an indoor healthy environment will be rewarded. The LEED version 4 features the transparent sourcing of building materials and discouraging use of toxic materials and promoting sustainably sourced materials for buildings. These are all especially important when we're looking at tightening the building envelope to conserve energy. Other features include even locating a project near a bicycle network. These two bills together work to enhance outdoor as well as indoor sustainability. They build capacity in our local market, and they set a new standard for our city and others worldwide in our efforts to achieve 80 by 50. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And now, the sponsor of Intro 721A, Councilmember Jumaane Williams. You want the height?
Yeah, I like the height.
You like the height?
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Taller than even usual. You're towering above me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Director Mesa, for their leadership on these issues. And as a city, we need to grapple with the increasing amount of new construction as climate change worsens. New York City has an obligation to ensure new construction is environmentally friendly, particularly when it's paid for by the taxpayers. Now, city-owned buildings will be required to meet stricter, expanded green standards. The amount of new construction in New York City continues to increase, and considering climate change, we have to continue our obligation to ensure the new buildings constructed by city are environmentally friendly. We're strengthening the lead with this 721, which is sponsored by myself. It updates and strengthens the green building standards for certain city capital projects, particularly those constructed with subsidy. The bill increases what's known as leadership in energy and environmental design, or LEED, and it strengthens reporting. Additionally, renews and strengthens reporting requirements as it expands the LEED certification requirements. And I want to thank the mayor, the director, Speaker Melissa Mark-Verita for her leadership, and the council staff, Laura Popa, Matt Gawab, Jeff Baker, Jen Wilcox, Alex Pelanoff, and my staff who's in the back, my deputy chief of staff and legislative director, Nick E. Smith. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now we will sign these bills.
So 4 and 4.
Okay. Ready to pass around? Pass it around.
I'm not this one, it's not my bill.
I would never do that.
We've seen your eBay posting.
Right. Just get a good price for that one. Here we go. We're 4 on this one, right?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well done. Well done. All right, now which staff? Bills are now law.
Thank you.
All right. Democracy is moving smoothly. Here we go. Okay, next we have a package of legislation that strengthens our city's human rights law. Our human rights law is already one of the strongest and most comprehensive in the nation, but there's always more we can do to make our city fairer and more inclusive than ever. The law already prohibits anyone who owns, leases, runs, or manages a public accommodation from denying a person access to a product or service for discriminatory reasons. Intro 805A goes further and adds franchisor, franchisee, and lessor to the list of people who cannot discriminate by refusing someone public accommodations on the basis of gender, race, disability, or any other protected class. Sponsor is Councilmember Daniel Drum. No New Yorker should be denied a service because of who they are or who they are perceived to be. Intro 814A clarifies that the human rights law must be interpreted broadly in order to maximize civil rights protections in all circumstances. The sponsor is Councilmember Brad Lander. It requires that any exemptions or exceptions to the human rights law be construed as narrowly and specifically as possible. This will ensure that people can't use those exceptions as an excuse to discriminate. Intro 818A gives the Human Rights Commission the authority to award attorney's fees to prevailing complainants who have brought a case before the commission. Sponsor is Councilmember Darlene Mealy. Too often, New Yorkers who have been victims of discrimination have had to pay the price, not once, but twice. Suffering an act of harassment or violence is troubling or traumatic to begin with. When they seek justice, they're often forced to pay out of their own pockets to cover their legal fees. While this bill won't take back the physical or psychological damage done, it will help cover the cost of their legal fees if they win their suit. Intro 819A removes antiquated language regarding sexual orientation from the New York City human rights law. Sponsor is Councilmember Rosie Mendez. Intro 832A makes it unlawful to deny someone housing because he or she is a victim of domestic violence. The sponsor is Councilmember Jimani Williams. Domestic violence tears apart the lives of so many individuals and their children so often. It's a fundamental challenge facing our city, made more difficult by the stigma attached to it. In so many cases, it means a family becomes homeless because they've had to flee their home for their own safety. And because some victims of domestic violence are then denied a place to live, and some victims of domestic violence are then denied a place to live because they are or are believed to be victims. This is a painful reality that we do not accept. With this bill, we stand up for what's right, an equal opportunity to live anywhere, no matter who you are. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the chair of the New York City Human Rights Commission, Carmelyn Morales. You like to hide your You're good.
Thank you. So thank you, Mayor de Blasio. So today's 5 bills were sponsored by 5 different council members. So this is yet another reminder of the great importance our wonderful elected leaders give to human rights in New York City. So we are very grateful for that. And as chair and commissioner of the City Commission on Human Rights, I continue to be grateful to this council for working with us to continually protecting all New Yorkers' rights to dignity and respect. So I thank you. And thank you especially to today's sponsors. Thank you to council members Mealy, Lander, Drum, Mendez, and Williams. Today's bills are consistent with the promise of the New York City Commission's human rights law, as captured in its construction provision, to accomplish the uniquely broad and remedial purposes of the law. They serve to further provide clarity of the city human rights law's robust protections. They remove language that had in the past cast a shadow on the protections against discrimination based on sexual orientation. They add housing protections against discrimination based on status as a victim of domestic violence, sex offenses, or stalking. So people who are already vulnerable because of these offenses are not made more vulnerable by a lack of housing. And they strengthen the City Commission on Human Rights as a venue by allowing the agency to award reasonable attorney's fees to complainants when the commission finds that unlawful discriminatory acts have occurred. The City Commission should be just as strong of a venue as if one goes to court and files these same exact claims. So as always, I want to give thanks to the different stakeholders of the commission who voiced their ideas on this bill, on the many bills that we have today and the issues involved in these bills, so that we could effectively work with them and the council actively and responsibly, and a lot of them are here today. And finally, I want to recognize our team at the administration. It's been a busy time at the commission, and these folks continue to be ever supportive, responsive, and helpful. So thanks to Maya Wiley, John Paul Lupo, Brittany Saunders, Blasio, Joni Kletter, Martha Alfaro, Shruti Raju, and Christine Billy. And of course, at the commission, I want to give my special thanks to Dana Sussman, who's our special counsel, and also to our policy counsel, Lauren Elfant. Thank you.
Very much. It has been a busy time. Keep up the good work. All right, it's now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 814A, Councilmember Brad Lander.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioner Morales. I think it's important and a good time to just take one step back at the New York City Commission on Human Rights and the human rights law and think about where we are in this administration. This is something that has not gotten the attention that it merits and deserves. When this mayor, this speaker, this council came into office, the New York City Commission on Human Rights was a real shadow of its former self. What had been a robust agency with something like 200+ staff in the Dinkins administration was decimated under Mayor Giuliani, decimated. The funding was cut to 10%, essentially, of what it had been before, with just a few lawyers, honestly, left in the place and no real teeth. So our New York City human rights law remained first in class, strongest in the country, but with nothing there to enforce it. And it got a little better in the next administration, but only a little. And so when the mayor and the council and the speaker came in, and then the mayor had the wisdom to hire Commissioner Morales, there was a long, long way to go. But we really have stepped up together. The speaker, in her State of the City last year, identified this as something that was important to the council. We worked in budget negotiations to add $5 million to the commission's budget to be able to essentially double its staff component. The commissioner came in and has reorganized the agency with a great staff, brought in proactive enforcement, started to get down the timeline it takes to process complaints, and then worked with the council to strengthen the law. And together we passed the employment credit check ban. Together we passed, and they're now implementing the Fair Chance Act, prohibiting discrimination against caregivers, all of that before today's package of extensive legislation. And it's a lot, and both the mayor and the commissioner went into the different bills. So I'll just say a word about 814, which I had the honor to be the prime sponsor of. That takes this wonderful phrase that the commissioner read, that the New York City human rights law must be construed liberally to achieve the broad and remedial purposes, the unique and remedial purposes of the law, regardless of whether state and federal law have been so construed. So when federal judges or some future president tries to do harm to the federal or the state human rights laws, New York City's uniquely strong human rights law, we will still be instructing judges to construe it broadly and do everything they possibly can under the law to defend the rights of New Yorkers against discrimination. And this law now identifies 3 particular cases where judges did that right, where they went in and construed the law broadly to find all possible opportunities under the law to defend New Yorkers from discrimination. It's part of this broader package that I'm proud to be a part of and to have worked with my colleagues, Council Members Williams and Kumba, but also Councilmember Mealy, Drum, and Mendez on the other pieces of legislation. We still have one more even coming, I think, soon, and hopefully our next bill signing. And a lot of hard work went into that. You know, both the administration, on the plus side, both the administration and the council really feel like the New York City human rights law is our law. Sometimes that means a little tussling over just where the commas go. And the staff did great work. So first of all, I want to give a big shout out to our staff, to Annie Decker and Caitlin Caruso and Wes Jones. And they worked very hard and closely with Joni and John Paul and Maya, and with the commission, with Commissioner Morales and Dana Sussman. It really was the kind of process that we can that all New Yorkers can be proud of, and that will really do a great job protecting us in the future. We have a long way to go. Let's not make any mistakes. Where we put our solid waste is still highly discriminatory. Women are still paid a lot less than men in many professions. There are so many places, unfortunately, where despite our best efforts, discrimination is still pervasive. But the team of people that fights it is back on the field, and we're proud to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Now he just cannot get enough of legislation today. Councilmember Jumani Williams, sponsor of Intro 832A.
You didn't have to pull it up. I
I just
appreciate it.
wanted to do that for you.
Thank you.
Lori's coming next. So you need it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the mayor for supporting this. I do want to second all the kudos that Councilmember Lander gave on what this administration has done with the commission and the foresight they had in hiring Commissioner Morales and what she's done since she's gotten there. It's really been a breath of fresh air. My bill has to do with domestic violence, domestic and intimate partner violence, and being a victim should never be grounds for discrimination. No one who has struggled with abuse or violence should face discrimination because of that abuse. Housing discrimination against domestic violence victims is very real. Victims find it difficult to find safe and affordable housing, and landlords, unfortunately, frequently discriminate against domestic and intimate partner violence. Nationally, 11% of evictions involve victims of domestic violence who are evicted due to the abuse. I remember when I was a provider at a nonprofit working with people who were dealing with this and the difficulty of getting resources that they can trust and that were meaningful. It is not a problem solely for women, but I think it is viewed as such. And unfortunately, I don't think it's been given the attention it deserves or the resources that are needed. Domestic violence doesn't just affect the partner, it affects families and affects communities. It's about time that we give it what's needed here. Denial of a lease, refusal to renew a lease, refusal of housing vouchers, temporary leaving home to escape DV, sex offense, stalking, all of those things are addressed in this bill. Women are disproportionately affected by intimate partner violence, with more than 1 in 3 women experiencing rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. We're hoping that with this bill, provide a little bit of assistance as far as that's concerned. We have a responsibility to do everything in our power to support and protect victims of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. Too often, victims are evicted or prevented from renting apartments simply because they have been abused. That is simply outrageous, should not be tolerated. And so today I'm proud to stand with Mayor de Blasio, as I assume he will be signing very shortly Intro 832 into law, making housing discrimination against victims of intimate partner violence and stalking illegal. We hope it provides at least some respite for people who are struggling at this moment in time. I want to thank Chair Milley, co-prime sponsors Melissa Margarito, Councilmember Landa and Cumbo, staff McElwab, Laura Popa, Rachel Cordero, Alicia Brown, Civil Rights Committee, Sanctuary for Families, and my staff, Nikki Smith. Thank you very much for this work that's being done. I really hope that the people who are suffering will get this information so they know they can no longer be discriminated because of this. And I hope landlords are paying attention, because we now have a commission that will be paying attention and will be watching for any illegal activity. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the Chair of the City Council Committee on Women's Issues, Lori Cumbo.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As chair of the Committee on Women's Issues, I am proud to be a co-sponsor of Intro 832, along with Council Members Williams, Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, and Council Member Brad Lander. And I'm so pleased to be here with Mayor de Blasio. This is such a historical time in our city. Domestic violence is the third leading cause of homelessness amongst families. And so many people actually don't know that figure, but it really must be brought home to all New Yorkers, the seriousness of this issue. It is fitting that this vital and even life-saving legislation will be enacted during Women's History Month as we celebrate the contributions of women towards the progression of our city, nation, and all over the world. It's so important that during this month we not only celebrate so much of the gains and victories that women have achieved, but that we also continue to make history every single year for future generations. Every 9 seconds in the U.S., a woman is assaulted or beaten. Intimate partner violence is the leading cause of female homicide and injury-related deaths during pregnancy. When women and individuals of color represent the majority of adult family-related homicide victims, we must take a proactive approach to educating New Yorkers about their rights and directly connecting them to city services. We can never let a woman or a family who has gotten the courage to leave a violent situation, we should never allow them to be bogged down with red tape or bureaucracy. Someone coming forward with that level of courage, we need to make sure, and this legislation will assist us in that effort, to make sure that every effort, every opportunity is given to them to rebuild, restart, and to gain their life back. So I want to thank everyone that has assisted in making this possible today. Again, I want to thank Mayor Bill de Blasio and all of my colleagues who worked collectively to make this happen. Thank you, and happy Women's History Month.
Thank you.
10 seconds.
All right. We're going to give
I went
Brad
on a
Lander
long
back for
time,
10
but
seconds.
I missed
We're
one
watching you.
important shout
Go
out,
ahead.
and I just a lot of people worked on this package of legislation, but Craig Gurian, who's here, did an enormous amount of work with the council, and I just want to thank him for all his work on this package.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, once in a while. We will now have public testimony. I want to call up 4 people. Margaret McIntyre, Jonathan Telecki, I'm not sure I'm saying it right, Craig Gurian, and Kevin Adler. Everyone
Hi.
can come on up and just get in line.
Hi, my name is Margaret McIntyre. I'm the chair of the Legislative Committee of NELA New York. NELA New York is the New York affiliate of the National Employment Lawyers Association. We represent employees in a lot of cases, mostly discrimination cases. I've been representing employees in discrimination cases for about 20 years now, and I'm quite confident that all of these bills, but especially Intro 814A, will get us a lot closer to the City Council's longstanding goal of eliminating discrimination in New York City. And so I'd like to thank Craig Gurian also for drafting this legislation. I think it's really important. I would like to thank Councilmember Lander for sponsoring it. I thank the council for passing it. And I thank the mayor for signing it today and his commission for carrying it out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kevin Adler. I'm the staff attorney at Sanctuary for Families. As the mayor pointed out, domestic violence victims have it really tough in the New York City housing market. I mean, everyone has it tough. But victims, we've seen time and time again, have been discriminated against all over the city purely for their status as a survivor of domestic violence. We see it on the one hand when victims come out of shelter looking for housing. We see it on the other hand when they're in stable housing being evicted for instances of domestic violence. I've represented several of those personally. I've seen it firsthand. So we think this is a really important bill and sends a real strong message to New York City's landlords that discrimination against domestic violence survivors will not be tolerated. I'd like to thank Councilmember Williams for his leadership on the bill, as well as Mayor de Blasio and his administration for making housing such a priority.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Jonas Santeluki. I'm here representing Jews for Morality. We came here today in order to oppose 805, 814, and 819. Less than 30 years ago, Ed Koch, when they passed the gay rights bill, promised the Jewish community and the religious community at large that the protections that are taken away in 819, specifically, for example, religious institutions, will be specifically included for sexual orientation because of the great danger it poses. My grandfather came to this country to escape persecution in Russia. He's coming here. It's very likely I will have to flee because of this law to New York City. This is not discrimination. You're trying to stop discrimination. This bill is discrimination. You have furthermore 814. It says that the exemptions, which include religious exemptions for criminals, it includes people like murderers could be included in this because there's a Criminal Non-Discrimination Act. Criminal Non-Discrimination Act says that it has to be direct effect on things. But if you're going to minimize how do you interpret what's minimal can mean anything. You could go as minimal as possible. You're now putting the burden of proof on you're switching the burden of proof from, instead of being on the defendant, it's now on the prosecutor. The prosecutor could easily go against and that's some of these decisions do. This bill puts people's lives in danger because of the Criminal Non-Discrimination Act included in this Non-Discrimination Act at large. This bill puts religious liberties at danger because you could say this is not a religious, when you minimize religious liberty, you could make this, religious schools could be forced to hire gays as teachers. Once you're making this as minimal as possible, it's very dangerous. This bill we were promised by the city that we would have protections. The protections obviously are not worth the paper they're written on.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. It's a billion
Next.
job. GDL,
Thank you.
it's a
Next.
billion job. You can't go against the creation of God.
All right, next person, please. Next speaker.
My name's Craig Gurian. With respect to the previous speaker, I think the city and its residents are going to survive just fine with these 5 enhancements to the city human rights law. I should first thank the speaker for making enhancement of the city human rights law a central part of her agenda. I'm proud to have brought forward legislation that has resulted in intros 805, 814, 818, and 819, and proud that an element of our bill on protection for survivors of domestic violence has been enacted via Councilmember Williams' independently developed intro 832, and I'm looking forward to working on other legislation with Councilmember Williams. My thanks to Chair Mealy and Councilmembers Drum and Mendez for their legislation. I want to give special thanks to Councilmember Lander for his work and leadership on intro 814. This bill, including its embrace of all of the doctrines of 3 critical cases, will protect and accelerate the gains of the 2005 Restoration Act passed when Mayor de Blasio was chair of the General Welfare Committee. I've seen many council members over the decades, but I haven't seen anyone either work harder or be more committed to achieving substantive results for both his constituents and the city as a whole is Brad Lander, and I salute him. I've been working on the city human rights law for quite a while now. Its moral force comes not from polling stakeholders or assessing what constituencies want. That force comes from a simple philosophy that was familiar to and expressed by Frederick Douglass 150 years ago. That is, discrimination is just wrong. Everybody deserves fairness, opportunity, respect, and dignity, and that's what these bills are about. I should actually remember to thank Bruce Springsteen, who graciously arranged his schedule so that we can celebrate the passage of 814 at the Garden tonight. Also thanks to a snowstorm in January.
Craig, I need you to wrap up.
Okay, I will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a thought specifically for you. When in 6 years, you're reflecting back on your 2 terms as mayor, there'll be many signature accomplishments that come to mind: universal pre-K, paid family leave, the first mandatory inclusionary housing. But I can tell you, as surely as the Restoration Act marked a great step forward 11 years ago, Intro 814, as well as Intro 815, passed last week by the Council, will enable important, powerful, practical progress in the ongoing fight for equal rights. So thank you for signing these bills today.
Thank you, Craig. Enjoy your concert.
Please don't remove the United States to Saddam. Please, please don't remove the United States to Saddam. Please don't. Please stop the rebellion against God. Please don't turn New York City to Saddam. Don't turn the United States to Saddam. Please don't. Don't turn New York City to Saddam and Amora. Please, please don't close the synagogues, the shuls, the yeshivas in Williamsburg. Please, please, it's a rebellion against God. It's a rebellion against God. Shame on you. 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 Don't remove the United States to Saddam. No, no, no. It's a rebellion against God. It's a rebellion against God. We are against this whole thing. It's a rebellion against God. It's a rebellion against God. Please, please don't stop this whole thing. It's a rebellion against God. Shame on you if you can't go against God. It's against God. Don't turn the United States to Saddam. Don't turn the United States to Saddam. Don't turn the United States to Saddam.
Sure, take one and then we'll pass the way around. Now Paul wants to put these on. Yeah, he has to do it together. Martin?
Jamani, where are you? 4 on this?
Yep.
Yep. This is the last one?
Yep, did everyone on up to the...
Yes.
Yep, we're good.
One more good, Jamani? There you go. Just want to ask you. All right, all of you do it now on. All right. We have one more bill. Everybody in the middle aisle there, I need you to just help us move along a little. So we got one more bill here. Here we go. Intro 763A. Finally, we have a bill that adds more transparency to the activity within our city's jails. Intro 763A requires the Department of Correction to report each month on all forms of violence in city jails. The sponsor is Councilmember Jalissa Ferreras-Copeland. Previously, I signed a bill requiring the Department of Correction to report on violence among adolescents in our jails. This bill expands that reporting to cover inmates of all ages. If there's any violence in our jails, whether it's violence against an inmate or against an officer, the public deserves to know. Now, a number of reforms are already underway at the Department of Correction. We made unprecedented investments for 100% camera coverage of all DOC facilities. We've invested in X-ray machines and other security measures. We're also hiring more officers and giving every officer specialized training to help them respond safely to inmates with mental illness. And we've already seen a decrease in the most serious violence from 2014 to 2015. The most serious use of violence towards inmates went down 23%, and the most serious assaults on staff went down 11%. But there is much more work to do, and we must keep our inmates and our officers even safer. I want to thank Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, Councilmember Jalissa Ferreras-Copeland, Councilmember Elizabeth Crowley, Chair of the Committee on Fire and Criminal Justice, and Commissioner of DOC Joseph Pont. There's no testimony. We will now, actually, let me say a few words in Spanish, and then we'll sign the last bill. Hoy estoy firmando 8 leyes para crear un informe municipal de la violencia en nuestras cárceles, reducir emisiones de gases nocivos y mejorar la eficiencia energética en nuevos proyectos y edificios de la ciudad, y fortalecer la ley de derechos humanos al prohibir que se niegue vivienda a las víctimas de violencia doméstica. Estas leyes nos ayudan a mejorar nuestro medio ambiente y a tener un gobierno más justo y transparente. With that, we will sign the last piece. Welcome. How are you? Thank you. All right. Thank you, Liz.
Great, yeah, so it's great.
3 it is. More? Okay.
Yeah.
How many have we
let's
got?
do,
We've got plenty of bills, plenty of pens for this bill.
let's do 5.
5 it is. Thank you. Okay. 2 more? You have that one? Okay. Who gets the last one?
One? Okay, we'll take care of crap. You'll get one, you'll take it. Great. Someone, yeah.
One more. This bill is now law. Well done. Thank you very much. That concludes the hearing. Well done.